Hello, hello.
Good morning. Sorry, I was muted. Okay, so I have this new thing, which is every call, at least one person has to try to talk and be muted. And since I've just done it, we're done with that for the day.
There you go. You checked it off of our list of things.
How's it going?
Great. How are you?
Good. It looks like we're going to have a very strong, wonderful attendance today.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
How's everything going with the rest of the week for you guys? Are all the events going well so far?
They are. They are. We've had, we had the healthcare program yesterday, and I think we had like 145 people on it from around the state.
Wow.
Hey, y'all. Can y'all hear me?
Hey,
Yeah.
Taylor. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Can hear you
Perfect.
good. How's it going over there in, where are you, Destin?
Yeah, hold on one second. Yeah, just initial your names here. And then
Robin, we just had someone named Tracy Bourgeois join the waiting room. Is that someone with your organization?
No.
Okay. It's just really early for somebody to be logging on just to join us.
Yeah, it is. Although sometimes people do it just to kind of get connected and then just do their thing. And I don't know. It's funny.
Yeah. So are you all thinking that overall the Imagine Freedom Days is going to be a big success? Are you feeling good about it so far?
Yeah. We've raised going into it, we were over half of our goal, which is pretty great.
That's amazing.
And then since then, we've had several Facebook, fundraisers and just other sponsors and donors that didn't get it together for the, official sponsorship, but they're wanting to come in. So yeah, I'm hopeful.
Good. That's wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you. And then tonight at 7:00, Joel Silver is featuring the Red Eye Connection at their show called Live in Tallahassee at 7.
Oh, cool.
So I might mention that because I think we'll have a big local crowd here today. But it was so much fun because Barbie Morrow talked about, her supply chain for all the coffees being trafficking free. And it just puts us in another mindset on this issue. I know, everybody comes in at a different place, but anyway, that was really fun to film and to get all that done. And and then on Saturday, another group called Christians Against Trafficking is having a program which they've asked us to participate in, and we've been doing that. And so I'll actually be going through Saturday on this push, which is, I can't, I'm like,
Sunday is going to be a day for you to relax.
Sunday, I'm just imagining, imagining freedom. No,
That's amazing.
So I did this yoga practice this morning, Catherine, and I kept mulling what myths. So tell me which ones you've pulled out to be in our quiz thing. And I want to make sure I don't duplicate that.
Yeah, I'm going to launch the poll for you to see.
Okay.
Can you see that now on your
That's
screen?
good. Yeah. It's over here for
So
some reason. Let me pull it over here.
I just included, you sent 11 questions and 10 was the max. And I hadn't read through the email you sent carefully. Later, I saw that you were like, which ones of these would you like? And so I see that, you had given me permission to like go through and weed out, but I thought they were all great. Um, I was sad to cut the 11th one, honestly. I was like,
Right.
but is
Okay.
10 too long, do you think? Would you rather pare it down?
I'm wondering, and then Courtney had a list of some that she pulled out on her document. Do you see that one as well?
I did, yeah. And that looked to me more like something that she would just include in her talking points. But
Okay.
I could have misunderstood that for sure.
I think that's where she was on that, and that, which is great, which is fine. I just don't want to, because she did draw from this list as well. Hey, Cecka.
Hey there, I'm just changing my background.
Good morning.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Cecka. We're glad you're with us today.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Because I think, oops, now there's an echo. Oh, gone. Like, I think she had we all got our reminders about being on this call.
Right.
Well, you look gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Good to have you. Look at that. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but I make jewelry, Cecka, and you have got to come and see some of my stuff, because I think,
Yes, ma'am. I am always, it is terrible. I have jewelry in like 3 different places, really 4 in my house. That's how bad it is.
No,
So we need to make a date.
we are sisters on this.
Yes,
So yeah, I make it, I buy it. It's just, it's my passion, but it really is. So that's so good. So good. We were just talking about the quiz, and did it come up for you too, Cecka? We've got a poll. Now I know we talked about for each of our presentations that we might go through our own, what we see as myths and facts. And then we could have some of these others come up as we go through our discussions. And as I was contemplating today too, I was just thinking, gosh, we have such an opportunity to have a conversation, which is different from a lot of these webinars. It's sometimes it's so driven by, PowerPoints or studies, which are good. But I think with all of us on this call, we really have the opportunity to bring people into a conversation. Again, I don't have any PowerPoint today. We're just going to, I'm going to flow with the points I usually do, but not with, citations and lots and lots of statistics and all that. So is that all still feeling good?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And one of the things that I wanted to hear from you was when you thought it would be best to launch the poll. Were you imagining doing this as kind of like a end of show recap of all the things that we've learned, or do you want to do it at the beginning to kind of see what gaps people have?
Well, one of the things that would be fun to do would be to, I wonder if we could have it up as people are signing on to do it.
Sure. Yeah.
What do you think?
I like that. And you could use them as, I don't want to say talking points, but as guidance points.
For sure.
As the poll is done.
Yeah. Can we do that, Catherine?
Absolutely. I mean,
I've
it's
not done that before,
yeah.
but I love the idea of just, maybe you announcing, hey, thanks everybody, for coming on early. Glad to see you. Now you can do a poll for us, which we're going to refer back to throughout the program, and then just have people start to do it. And then we can, and then you'll get responses back. You'll be able to tell the answers. Like at any time, maybe after we do our initial 4 comments of things, we can get the poll results maybe about halfway through the program.
Yeah, that sounds great. So
Yeah.
I can leave the poll up until about 10:05. I'll admit everyone at 10 o'clock. And then, once I admit everyone from the waiting room, I'll just direct them to the poll. And then at 10:05, I'll go ahead and start introducing you all. We can leave the poll up for a few more minutes if I can, if it looks like people are still actively engaging in it. I'll close it out when I'm done introducing you all. And then it's been a while since I've run a Zoom poll. Once I close it, then it's going to give me the results, and can I just share those with you in the chat? Do you know the best way to do that?
Can you, when you get the results, can you wait to share them till we each go through our 4 different, intro sections?
Yes. Okay, I see. So it gives me the option here to share the results. Okay.
Right. But you don't have to do that right away.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually what we might do is, and again, I think we can be loose, we can be informal on this and just go with our initial presentations. And then we can, and just say, hey, Catherine, how about if we just see those poll results and everybody, let's walk through them. And I'll just throw it out to you all and say, hey, looks like, we had a split of opinion on this. Let's talk about this point. And then we can almost use those as a jumping off point.
That sounds great to me.
Okay.
I'm looking over the document that Courtney sent, and so she has it laid out in like myth versus reality.
Mhm.
So it'd be really helpful to have the reality to share, in contradiction of the myth, but it's not in the same order as the poll that I've created. So we might need to, just kind of ad lib a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And Robin, just real quick, because I was just going through my notes and through the notes that you kind of provided, our little run of show.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to keep my comments centered on the foster care system because that's kind of my area of expertise. So one of the comments in here, which is true, is that a lot of our HT youth are community kids and might be living at home. That's probably more for the ODON piece of this.
I would agree.
Because, that is clearly what ODON is for. That is one of the age groups. So I'm going to keep mine centered on foster care and, anecdotally, like the number of kids we see that come into foster care and the difficulty that it presents with those that are HT involved, that type of thing.
Okay, that sounds fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And then again, one of the things that you can talk about is how you, like a sub agenda for us is to talk about how we need everybody, how you connect with other agencies, because I think this group is going to be a lot of social services providers. Mm-hmm. So as you care for those children, where have you found help and assistance in the community? Have you seen these families' needs being met or not met, and how can we send the message that everybody needs to know something about trafficking so that they know how to best care for their, clients and all that. Is that okay?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I was just, because I have that in my notes, I was just kind of underlining it. I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I hear an echo. I hear myself echo somehow, somewhere. Do you hear that?
Mm-mm.
I do, yeah.
Maybe I should turn down my volume on my end. Let me do that.
It sounds better now.
That could be why. Okay. Oh, so you like the NOLA, the North Carolina, New Orleans document, you said, Catherine, right?
Oh, yeah. It was incredibly comprehensive.
Mhm.
You
I
know,
learned a lot reading it.
would you be able to throw that into the chat at some point as well?
Definitely. Let me find that email. Okay, yeah, I've got it here now. So if you just want to, mention it at some point so people have a context for it, when I
Yes.
put it in the chat, I'll be ready and waiting to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Cecka, for Robin, I'm going to introduce her as the ED of STAC, as well as co-chairing the Big Bend Coalition of Human Trafficking. I've got Taylor as, her role with the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence, and then her role as a board member on Capital T. I only for you have you being the regional ED for Children's Home Society. Is there any other board membership in particular that you want me to highlight?
Yeah, I'm actually on the UPHS board.
Right. Yes, I know.
Here's one.
Yeah, I'm on the UPHS board, and I'm also on the South City Foundation board.
Okay. Okay.
If
Great.
that means anything for this,
Yeah.
for these purposes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, is Courtney on yet? Let's see.
I don't see her in the waiting room yet. She said that she was going to be here hopefully by 9:55, so I'm sure she'll be with us any minute.
She is having a big week too.
Oh my gosh.
All four of you are. Goodness. It's just it's that October moment, right?
Mhm.
Frozen. Let me close some of these things out.
I'm also going to work offline so I don't have these dings coming in. Let's see. All right.
Close my
Turn off my phones. Do we have the chat limited to just us? Let's see. I don't know if you have it, Catherine, but I'm just gonna give you my cell.
Okay. I'm also gonna make the three of you co-hosts. And that way there is a chat option to message host and co-hosts. So if we need to, have a specific chat amongst the five of us, we can do that. And I'm also putting my cell in the chat to you, Robin.
Okay.
And then for me in the chat, if I click the, well, no, wait a second.
Looks like people are coming in.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots of people. Still no Courtney though that I see.
So you've got the poll up. It will show the percents as you keep it up, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Well, as people are coming in, you want to?
Sure, yeah, I can go ahead and admit the people who are in the waiting room right now. Are you ready, Cecka?
Yes.
Great. Welcome, everyone. We're so happy that you can join us today for our UPHS webinar celebrating Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center's Imagine Freedom Days. We are opening up our waiting room a little bit early so that you can join us and participate in a poll. Please let me know if you don't see the poll active on your screen. But we have 10 questions about myths and facts regarding human trafficking that we would love for you to answer. So go ahead and dive into that when you are able to. And for those of you who are just now joining us, I'll repeat what I just shared. We are welcoming you to our webinar today. We have shared a poll with you. So as you get settled and get connected, locate the poll in your Zoom window and go ahead and answer these questions. We've presented 10 questions for you to review about human trafficking myths and facts. Our webinar is scheduled to begin at 10, but there are people who are still coming into our waiting room. So we're just gonna give everyone some more time. We're gonna let the poll stay live for a little bit and we'll plan to start our discussion around 10:05. And again, I will welcome all of you who have just joined us in the last couple of moments. We are waiting to give everyone a chance to log on. And while we are waiting to begin the conversation, we invite you all to participate in the poll that you see live here. We're presenting questions to you about human trafficking myths and facts, and would love to get your input on what you currently know about these topics. So please take a moment to answer these 10 questions for us, and we'll get started in just a moment. All right, it looks like we're getting a lot of participation for the poll. Thank you so much, those of you who have had an opportunity to fill that out. Just looking through our participants, it looks like we have an amazing group here today. We're so glad that you all could join us. I'll give you just one more moment for those of you who have just joined us to engage in this poll that we have live here, and then we'll get started in just one more minute. All right, well, it is 10:05, so let's go ahead and begin this wonderful event. We've been looking forward to this for weeks, and I'm just so excited to have you all join us today. I'm Catherine Register with United Partners for Human Services, and we have an incredible panel who has joined us today to tell us more about human trafficking in the Big Bend. What are the myths and what are the realities? Robin Hassler-Thompson is joining us as the Executive Director of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. As we all know, that goes by STAC. She is working in anti-trafficking and co-founded this nonprofit in 2015. Robin co-chairs the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking and is a member of its Social Services Committee. Cecka Rose Green is also with us today. She is the Regional Executive Director for the Big Bend, Tallahassee area for Children's Home Society of Florida. She serves on the board of United Partners for Human Services and the South City Foundation. Taylor Biro is also joining us today. She is the vice chair and founding board member for Capital T, which provides crisis intervention and mutual aid for people who are LGBTQ+. She also serves as the director of strategic initiatives for the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence, where she leads the trauma-informed policing, high-risk victims training, and rape prevention education program. And last but certainly not least, we have Courtney Atkins with us, who is the executive director of both Whole Child Leon and the South City Foundation, where she leads collaborative efforts and initiatives urging open communication and the sharing of resources between agencies to improve outcomes for all children. We are so glad to have each of you with us today to speak to us on this important topic. Robin, you want to take it away?
Yes, I'm delighted to. And thank you so much, Catherine. And thank you, everybody, for being with us today. This is an outstanding number of folks who are available. I recognize some of you, and I have to right off the top say hello and thank you to board member of STAC, Debbie Kearney, who is here. Sponsors, Dan Thompson, as you can tell, we might be related. Good to see you on the Zoom. We've got lots of others here who have been steadfast and wonderful supporters of human trafficking, anti-human trafficking efforts. And I also need to say thank you to all of the people who are on the panel today. It's really an honor to be with you and to be sharing this space today. A very special thank you to Catherine, to you for everything you and UPHS have done and do in our community. And if I could take a moment, y'all, just to give you a commercial. You're probably on this because you or the agency you're with is a member of UPHS. But if you're not, I really encourage you to be part of it. You all have made a huge difference to STAC, to our ability to be alive in this community, to be supported with funding with one another. So United Partners for Human Services is a terrific organization that that really I encourage you all to become a member of. So thank you, Catherine, for all that you and Amber and LaShawn do. This morning, this is going to be, I hope you find this to be an extremely informative fundraiser. I'm thinking about the fact that we're doing this as part of our annual fundraiser, an extremely informative event. And let me tell you, this is part of Imagine Freedom 2021. It is STAC's days of action, which include fundraising, so we can stay involved and alive in the community, supporting survivors of human trafficking and doing this kind of work, doing outreach and education. I'll put something in the chat about our events. Know that over these 3 days, we are having 4 different events. Tonight at 6:30, there'll be an event of understanding what human trafficking is for Spanish speakers. The whole event will be done in Spanish. Tomorrow, we have an event, which is part of the Third Friday event for our Big Bend community, which is the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking. The title of that program is It Takes a Village. And I think you'll see that thought and that reality reflected in our program today. In terms of that event, you can get all the information and the link I just put up in the chat. You'll find that tomorrow we have many different individuals from many different parts of our community, from the faith community, business community, law enforcement, representation by individuals who've been involved in this. I think I saw, do we see Justin was on the call? Justin Barfield is going to be talking about CCUAS and their good work. So we have a lot of folks on tomorrow. Really encourage that. And also, let me tell you, one of the other parts about the anti-trafficking work we do in the community is to really encourage businesses and those of us who are consumers to consume goods and services from places that are trafficking free. So you might wonder, how do I know if it's trafficking free or not? Well, one way you can know, and I know most of us drink coffee or tea or something, is to visit Red Eye Coffee. Tomorrow, they'll be having the Imagine Freedom Latte. And I wanted to mention Red Eye because they take care to make sure that all of their goods and services and labor involved in their business, their supply chains are all trafficking free. So that's something I know, especially young people, but all of us get a lot of really good attention on, and it's something to remember. So let me share with you part of our agenda today and to open up the program in a formal way. First, you've seen that there's a poll up, and the poll is really was around our myths and realities in the Big Bend. One of the things we know for sure is that misinformation or kind of mistaken assumptions really do a disservice to one another, to the clients and the people we assist, whether they're trafficked or not, and also to just stopping and ending human trafficking in our community. So we want to focus today on these myths and the realities in the Big Bend. And this poll was a way to start out that thinking. What we'd like to do too is have this be a conversation. So the way our program is going to go, and we're going to go for 90 minutes, is to start with each of the presenters, the 4 of us, giving you some information, and to then open it up for discussion. We do not have a formal PowerPoint. We really are accenting questions and answers, discussion, and in all kinds of levels of involvement, whether on the chat or you're being able to participate when we can hear you ask questions, etc. So for about 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to go through some of what we've kind of planned for you all. And then we're going to kind of open it up and have some discussion. We're going to go make sure we go through these myths and facts, the poll you just took, and again, be able to kind of have a good discussion. I think you'll find too, with everybody who's on this poll, Taylor, Cecka, Courtney, they're wonderful, exciting people. I wish we were all sitting together actually around a table having coffee at Red Eye, but I think you'll find this to be a very interesting and informative program. So let's start out. One of the things that I'd like to do is help ground us. So what is human trafficking? And first of all, let me go into just a smidgen more detail about STAC. So STAC was formed in 7 years ago, almost, in February. We're a nonprofit that we do 2 things. We do this kind of work, and we provide direct assistance to survivors of sex and labor trafficking. And that is survivors of all ages, whether or not they're immigrants, whether it's sex or labor trafficking, as I said, or both. We have been doing this work solely, and that's all we do is focus on the issue of human trafficking. And then we do this assistance, and I'll tell you, since the onset of COVID, our caseload has tripled. We've seen a real impact in terms of the pandemic and what we're able to, what we have been able to do in terms of assisting people who are affected. And we also do this kind of awareness. Since our inception, we've trained over 8,000 people. We do a lot of our training, of course, since the pandemic online, and are really grateful. So for everybody who's ever attended. So that's what we do. We're a deliberately small organization because of that sort of mantra of it does take a village. And as you'll see today, a victim of human trafficking or who's been affected or groomed or almost trafficked can be anyone. It could be a toddler, it could be a skilled welder from another country. And you can imagine not one single agency has the ability or capacity to really address the needs of every trafficking victim. So what we do is we do this through our the excellent work, and I see her on the program, is Graciela Marquina, is our community services advocate. What she does is to do this work in concert with everyone else in the community. Many of you on this Zoom today are people we've worked with, and that's the only way we can really meet the needs of survivors, as well as, like today, meet the needs of everyone to understand this issue. So that's who we are and what we do. I'd like to take a moment now and just talk a little bit about what human trafficking is. You might know overall that Florida is third in the nation when it comes to the number of cases and number of people who are trafficked, and that's according to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. That's a national hotline that is 24/7, multilingual, available all the time. And really, I think since the inception of the hotline over a dozen years ago, Florida has been in that number 3 position. It's really difficult for us to say how many cases of human trafficking are in our state. Even with that number, we know those are calls to the hotline, but how many are there? We don't know. It's a very clandestine operation. Human traffickers deliberately do their utmost to make sure these cases stay secret, that victims stay isolated, and that it's very difficult, of course, for survivors to get out of these situations. And we'll talk more about that today, as well as to even identify in some cases as being trafficked. So that's why, too, a lot of you on this call as service providers are vital to helping people understand the dynamics of what situation they might be in, whether it's a sex or labor trafficking situation, and to do something in terms of getting help and assistance and support. So know that all those are just kind of a general scope of the numbers. And we sometimes do get those questions, how many are here? And we don't know. And there are a lot of reasons for that we'll go into. The other thing is to understand that human trafficking, while it's a crime, it's also a human rights violation. So in order for it to constitute as a crime per se, the law prescribes both at the federal level and at the state level what it looks like. So now understand that trafficking can be the recruitment, it could be a recruiter, it could be somebody who one person asks another person and kind of gets them in a trusting relationship. Say a young man says to a young woman, you know, if you come, stay with me, I'll be able to provide you food, shelter, money for groceries, a way to support your child. And then they develop that kind of relationship, and then he says, now it's the time for the payback. I need you to do A, B, or C. It could be in a commercial sex act situation. That could be prostitution or any commercial sex act. At the same time, consider that situation, that person is the recruiter. He's the person who's also forcing that individual into an exploitive situation. And consequently, that person is a trafficker and the person he's been talking to is a victim. Now, if there was some sort of just a ask or an inducement and that person is a child, you don't even have to show force or fraud or any kind of coercion, because the law says if you're a child, even inducing or asking someone to commit a commercial sex act makes that person a victim of trafficking, and that asker or that inducer a trafficker. And the same is true of labor trafficking in Florida. We see children too, and we'll talk a lot about kids today. And one of the things to understand is that a kid doesn't have to be forced and minor into a labor trafficking situation either under Florida law. It's different on the federal level, but focusing on Florida, just understand that children are treated specially by the law, and really because they're children are especially vulnerable, and the law recognizes that. Know that, so what I've described is a series of acts that somebody takes to exploit another person using force or fraud or coercion. And I will tell you what we've seen. I don't even want to say 9 times out of 10, it's almost 10 times out of 10. We have seen that coercion and the fraud are really the two greatest elements because of this grooming process that traffickers have over an adult or a child, an immigrant or a US citizen, in order to get them into this situation of exploiting them. And then the third part of it is for a purpose or for some kind of commercial gain. It doesn't need to be an exchange of money. It could be that situation I described at the beginning where someone needs a roof over their heads, food for their family, whatever it is, an exchange of anything in a commercial kind of situation where there's a benefit. There's some sort of benefit to that trafficker, a commercial gain. Very often, of course, it does involve money. Also understand that trafficking and smuggling are different. Very often we see it confused in the press, and it's one of these myths. And here's where some of it comes from. For trafficking, understand that you don't have to cross a border. We have seen instances in our community, sadly, very sadly and tragically, where parents have trafficked their own children. It could be that trafficking takes place in a home, doesn't even not crossing a national border, doesn't have to cross a state border, doesn't have to cross a county border, doesn't have to cross really a street for that to constitute trafficking. Smuggling, the heart of smuggling is movement, right? For trafficking, no movement; for smuggling, movement. And you have to cross an international border for smuggling. Often in smuggling cases, what happens is someone pays a smuggler to take you across an international border. When you arrive to that destination, all interactions end. You go your way as someone who's been smuggled here, the smuggler goes away as well. Where those cases can turn into trafficking is when someone agrees to be smuggled across the border, and then they arrive here and someone says, oh, you owe me another $5,000. And the way you have to pay it back is this: you have to work in this hotel, you have to work in this field, you have to work in this factory, you have to work in this home, you have to work in this brothel. Essentially, you have to pay me back by doing how I dictate you pay me back. And that's when smuggling can turn into trafficking. But understand, they are two different things and really involve the autonomy of the person. A trafficker totally controls that person, a smuggler does not. So those are some of the basics of trafficking. And what I'm going to do is just encourage you too. If I said something that doesn't sound like it made any sense, please put it in the chat and say, can you repeat what you just said? Or I need a citation to the law, and we'll do all this. So also I wanted to say, and because of the title of this, you can guess what we are doing is trying to dispel myths. So I think you probably already know this, but I will tell you, as recent as a week ago, someone that we're working with very closely said she went out to dinner and she was telling her friends, hey, I'm working on this project with STAC. I would like to, tell you all a little bit about it. And she started talking about human trafficking, and all of these people around the table said, wait a minute, that's not here. That might be in Atlanta or Tampa or big cities. And she had to take part of their time over dinner and explain, yeah, trafficking is right here in Leon County. So that's one of the things I wanted to just, and in our whole region of the Big Bend, in rural areas. So I wanted to just put that out as my first myth and an explanation of why. The second is, you've heard me explain also that human trafficking involves both labor and sex trafficking. People think, and I think it's because of Hollywood or maybe too many SVU shows, but people think that that human trafficking is sex trafficking, period. what everyone needs to understand is that globally there's more labor trafficking than there is sex trafficking. They're both horrific, and what we've seen is people can be both labor trafficked and sex trafficked. I mean, imagine a woman who's picking tomatoes in the field by day and is being raped or forced to have sex at night by the crew boss, because that's how she keeps her job. Or a sex trafficking victim, a youth who's being forced to shoplift. I'm reading a lot about organized retail crime, who's being forced to shoplift, which is actually a labor, forcing someone to be a drug mule, that's forcing someone, or to just clean the hotel or the motel where the sex act would have taken place. So understand that human trafficking is all of those things, is both sex and labor trafficking. And the third issue I want to mention, and maybe we can talk about this more as well, is there's an overwhelming focus in our society on when someone is trafficked and providing them services and support, to get out of that situation and then be, quote, free of the trafficker. What we see and what we know is that the trauma associated with trafficking is lifelong, and that someone who was trafficked as a teenager could really, in her later years, still be suffering tangible effects of that time of having been trafficked. So know that too, our frames of reference sometimes are very much over the short term, and that is a misconception that many people have. I will tell you that someone we've worked with directly was trafficked as a teenager, and as she went to apply for a job in her 50s, the arrests that happened as she was a teen showed up on her record, and she disclosed them because you have to. And all of the issues, all of the trauma, or at least some of it, came back, and it still haunts her to this day. So know that human trafficking is not just a short-term thing to focus on. The reality is it's quite extensive and potentially lifelong, where that's where people can always use our help and support. So I think I've gone a bit over on this, but I wanted to give us a firm foundation and now turn it over to Taylor, who's going to discuss some of the larger societal contexts of human trafficking and their impact on survivors, particularly in the LGBTQIA+ community. And Taylor, I'd like to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you. And it's just so exciting to be here with STAC and UPHS hosting this event. An honor to be speaking next to our amazing speakers. And I was looking through the participant list, and some of you could be up here teaching this as well, which is really exciting. So we have a lot of experts in our community. So today I'm going to talk about LGBTQ folks as it relates to human trafficking. And I wanted to start with part of my identity that's not on my bio. I am a proud queer woman, and I was also homeless when I was younger. And I've also done sex work in the past when I was younger as well. So I've lived many lives in this town, some by needing social services and community support, and some by working in social services and developing ways to provide new community support. So that's the perspective that I wanted to speak with today. And I am also a data nerd, so I wanted to start with some numbers for you all. Starting with LGBTQ youth, the Polaris study shows that, that one number we all know, of homeless youth, 40% identify as LGBTQ, which is huge. 46% have run away from home due to family rejection. 7.8 times more likely to experience acts of sexual violence, so more than their straight peers. And then 3 to 7% more likely to use sex work as a way to meet their basic needs, such as shelter, foods, self-medicating, things like that. I also wanted to do a side note that after reading with sex worker collectives, using the term survival sex does not adequately validate sex work, as all work is survival. So I just wanted to make sure I was saying that. And then some data points for adults. So the unemployment rate for transgender people is 3 times higher than the national average. 57% of trans women of color are going to make $10,000 or below $10,000 a year. And then this one always gets me, which is, the average life expectancy of a cis, so a non-trans woman, is 85. And yet the average life expectancy for a Black transgender woman is 35 years old. And I wanted to say those data points, though I don't think we always need to wait for the numbers to believe people who tell us their experiences. But I did want to leave those out there and just say, one of the myths is we say this can happen to everyone or anyone. And that's true, but it disproportionately happens to people that our system has designed its way of keeping out. The system was designed to keep out people of color, LGBTQ folks, Indigenous folks, folks who are living with disabilities. And when you have nowhere to turn to in your community or in your home, that's where traffickers find you. You're vulnerable, you're out there without anything. And that idea of, I have a place for you to stay, or you're too pretty to sleep at the shelter, or this or that, leads people to trafficking and being more vulnerable. And so when I say our current system wasn't designed to support LGBTQ youth and adults, I just want to point out things like HUD sent out a few years ago information for homeless shelters on how to identify a trans woman, and how dangerous that is to have done. And also how Florida still allows the gay panic law, where you can beat an LGBTQ person and then later use the defense that you didn't know they were gay or you didn't know they were trans, as if that is a reason for violence. And so, most workplaces that I've seen don't have policies on LGBTQ folks, on how to keep us safe, how to make sure that we can transition properly within the workplace and show up as our authentic selves. And also social services. This is a place where we should be the experts, right? All of us. And I still don't see those policies that make it safe. So when LGBTQ folks are faced with fewer resources, fewer employment opportunities, we're pushed out into the streets. And when a lot of folks do sex work, which I've known a lot of friends who have done that, a lot of people I've worked with who have done that, sex work is not the issue. Sex work makes you more vulnerable for being trafficked, in the same sense that being a migrant worker makes you more vulnerable for labor trafficking. So the issue is not that someone has found a way to survive, a raft to float on in a drowning environment. The issue is that we have no other options to provide to people for them to thrive. And so despite LGBTQ people being overrepresented in data, the stuff that I mentioned above, with homelessness, with violence, with employment, we really aren't seeing an equitable response to that. We aren't seeing prioritization for LGBTQ folks. There's no funding in this town that we can really reach out to and say, prioritize us, right? And so that's where Capital T comes in. Capital T was created by a Black trans woman named Janelle Diaz. She is a fierce advocate in our community. I'm sure many of you know her. And she started Capital T when she started transitioning here in Tallahassee. She had no resources. She looked around and there was not a place for her to turn. And so she created something. She created a support group for trans locals. And hearing more from people through those support groups in our community, we learned that we needed to do more and that we could not wait for the system to catch up and prioritize us. And so we turned to our community. We turned to you all. Many of you all have been our best supporters in this town. And we started a mutual aid fund in crisis intervention. And that's what it is. It's grassroots. We're right there creating community and relational connections with other people in our LGBTQ plus community. And we're listening and we're meeting you where you're at. No judgment. You are leaders right alongside us. And you tell us what you need and we believe you. So we've tried to throw out some of the social services books, the handbook on how to do it, and instead listen to what the people in front of us are telling us we need to do. We are a bit of a baby, but we are growing and we are constantly turning in the direction that our community asks us to. And part of that is you all who are part of our community of folks who want to do more and want to make your spaces safe and reaching out to us. And so we're here as well for consulting and advice and training and anything, but thank you. Yeah.
Taylor, thank you so much. And we look forward to kind of getting into these issues even deeper with your expertise and the work of Capital T going forward. Cecka, I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about what you do at CHS, the issues around human trafficking as you've seen them, as you've been a service provider and are a service provider on this issue, and some of the ideas you have about what we need to look at, again, in a kind of wider societal context in order to address this issue. And thank you as well for joining today.
Oh, thanks, Robin. Thank you so much for having me. And again, I have to say, to be in the company of these professionals is just absolutely awesome. And it is interesting that we are at this point in time in our community, in our state, and in our country, where we are having very brave and open conversations about our vulnerable populations and our populations that by no fault of their own find themselves in situations where they are trafficked or abused or not able to seek gainful employment and things of that nature. So as the Regional Executive Director of Children's Home Society of the Big Bend, we operate several programs that deal in that child welfare space, the early childhood space as well, and education. Currently, we are the provider for case management for foster care, adoptions, and independent living here in the Big Bend. That will be transitioning over to another agency. But during the time that we have been in this field, we have seen more and more youth in foster care who have been victims of human trafficking, and that can be labor trafficking as well as sex trafficking. So there are a couple of things that I just want to build on from what Robin and Taylor have both said. So the foster care system can intersect with many of the things that they talked about. So number one, we can't emphasize enough that in the state of Florida, a child, a person younger than age 18, cannot consent to anything. So it is not a choice for them. It is not, they decided to do this. They decided to work so that they could take care of themselves by this person. They decided to sell their body irrespective of this person coaxing them. So that is really important, especially when you're thinking about children who are in foster care that have been victims of human trafficking. And then to piggyback off of Taylor, we do see children who identify as LGBTQIA+ definitely being more susceptible. Many times, as she said, because if there are issues in the family and they are not able to stay in that birth family, they literally end up homeless and on the streets, and it makes them more susceptible to that type of trafficking. The next thing is, a lot of people believe that it is only certain zip codes, only certain areas, only certain neighborhoods, and nothing could be further from the truth. Human trafficking in this community happens in every zip code, from 32301 all the way to 32312, and getting into the outer areas of 32314 and 15 as well. There is no area in our community that is not touched in some way by human trafficking. And then the next thing is when Courtney talks about the lifelong effects of trafficking. So let's just think about trauma within itself. So one of the things that CHS tries to do, and I think does very well, is incorporate evidence-based practice and trauma-informed care into the programs that we administer. One of the traumas that tends to be left out of that is the effect of systemic racism and implicit bias, and how that affects persons of color, persons who are not what we would call Anglo, and then also persons who identify LGBTQIA+. And so when you look at the trauma that life has in it anyway. And if all of us think, we can think of traumatic things that happen to us. Some may be mild, some may be very heavy. And all it takes is one triggering incident that brings that back. Many of us have learned how to cope with that. And many of us have gotten the treatment that we need not to fall back into whatever that was that caused the trauma. When you're looking at HT, human trafficking, that literally changes the way that the mind thinks. And so very similar to someone who is in recovery from some sort of addiction, they say relapse is a part of recovery. One of the hardest group of children in foster care to treat and to give them what they need to be able to effectively come out of a human trafficking situation is them understanding that trauma, because a child's mind is different than an adult's mind anyway. And so it is very hard to figure out how to treat them so that they can come out of the human trafficking and try to get into a system of living that allows them to thrive and be the best that they can be. So when we think about what are the things that can help alleviate human trafficking in children who are younger than 18, I think first and foremost, there has to be a recognition of the role that systemic racism and implicit bias plays in our kids' lives. That's the first thing. The second thing is when we talk about placements for children who are in foster care, we need more and more homes that open themselves up to placements for children who identify as LGBTQIA+. That can be difficult because you have religious beliefs, moral beliefs, phobias, all kinds of things that stand in the way of opening up your home and your heart to a child who may not be able to stay in their home. And then the third thing is really prevention, intervention, and diversion programs. Why do I say that? Because a large number of the children that end up in HT situations and end up involved in foster care, believe it or not, were trafficked by family and friends, birth family and friends. And while that is hard for many of us to comprehend, it is absolutely amazing how often that happens. And so it is important to have prevention and intervention and look at all of the societal determinants that feed into this type of crime. And if we can address that, then many times we can address those negative impacts that result from when those things are not there. So I just thank you so much for allowing me to talk a little bit about this from a dependency standpoint. And I look forward to any questions, because I'm sure there are going to be a lot of them as we move through this discussion. So thanks, Robin.
Thank you so much, Cecka. And you have, again, really shown us how it does take a village, and that we're all also around prevention of human trafficking as well. So that's great. And everyone, do feel free to put your questions in the chat. We're going to get to them right after we hear from Courtney, who is our new anti-human trafficking partner here with Whole Child Leon and the Open Doors Outreach Network. Courtney is going to talk to us about what they're doing now. And many of you know as well that Courtney has been doing this work in the community for a long time. Again, an honor to be with you today too, Courtney. So talk to us a little bit about what's going on in the world of Whole Child Leon now. And again, I'm just so excited to be linking arms with you. I think we've got you on mute still. All right, it happens once every call. So
it happens to me every day. Yes. Well, thank you, Robin. I am so excited to be the newbie in this space of human trafficking. Whole Child Leon is really excited to be the new We've partnered with Voices for Florida to be the new provider of the Open Doors Outreach Network. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that is. And this is for the Big Bend, but I want to say that while I know you, Robin, and Cecka and Taylor, and have had a chance to work with you peripherally in the past, I'm really excited that we're going to be working closer together. And so this is fantastic. And Catherine, thank you to you and UPS HS for having me too and hosting today. So, and before I get started, a little bit about what the Open Doors Outreach Network is, I want to just say I'm learning more and more from you women, and I can't stress to this group enough how, human trafficking is happening in our community, in children's homes. It's really a lot closer than people realize. And so I'm learning that, and I appreciate that that's been emphasized today so much by all of you. But in July of this year, Whole Child partnered with Voices to become the Open Doors Outreach Network provider. We are going to be serving Leon, Jefferson, Madison, Taylor, Wakulla, Franklin, Liberty, and Gadsden counties. And our network serves children and young adults, so children 10 years to 24 years old who are verified or suspected survivors of commercial and sexual exploitation. So this includes victims of familial trafficking, individuals trafficked by boyfriends or partners, or any form of human sex trafficking. So that's kind of our population. And I'm excited to say that we have onboarded our team, our outreach team. It's a kind of a mobile team, and it consists of a survivor mentor, a clinician, and a regional advocate, as well as the victim services coordinator role, which I share with Corey Gooden, who's a licensed clinical social worker, many of you may know. I'd like to just take a minute. I think our regional advocate is on this call, Charlie Jackson. Charlie, if you'll just wave to everybody, we're really excited. You'll be seeing more of Charlie, and she'll be out in the community sharing a little bit about the work we do. But, basically, we were able to travel to counties and provide on-site support services. And we really, what's different is we incorporate the survivor experience in all that we do to help. We really use a strength-based perspective when we're working with victims and survivors. We provide individualized trauma competent services, individual or group counseling with our clinician, wellness plans. We do court advocacy. We're 24/7, 365 hotline. And so we are really trying to, get that information out now as the new provider in the community. And we understand that, the providers that we're going to be referring to and the way that we work, that we need to be really flexible with this population. We started accepting clients at the middle of September, and we already have a couple that we are working with. And we have a lot to learn. We're just trying to make sure that we connect with STAC and Children's Home Society and Capital T and others to make sure that we are working well together. With STAC, Robin and I are now looking at an MOU between our two agencies to really talk about how we can keep communication open, share what we're doing with each other's programs. I certainly hope that, STAC will refer to Whole Child and our Open Door Outreach Network program, and we'll do and vice versa. So it's really, hopefully, the experience that Whole Child has in working in the community and knowing that relationships are about the most important thing we do. I think we're poised to do a good job with this project. It's really, really important. And I think it's important that we know that we are new at this game. I think we were successful in getting the contract in large part because we do have a pediatric behavioral health navigator project. We started that program with the Tallahassee Pediatric Foundation about 4 years ago. So physicians, pediatricians, and family practice doctors in Leon County refer children 0 really to age 21 to Whole Child for behavioral health navigation. We bring the families in. It's an integrated model where we do an in-depth consult with the family, and then we make connections. We don't talk about referrals. We connect to our vetted providers and make sure that the family and the child get the support they need. It's not always cut and dry that this child just needs therapy services or a psych eval. Sometimes it's many times it's a family systems issue with lots more going on. Sometimes even sexual and human trafficking has come through these doors. So we receive about 60 to 100 referrals a month. So we're seeing a lot of kids here. And I think we have established some really good relationships with providers. So we are looking forward to our two programs, the Open Doors Outreach Network program and our Behavioral Health Navigator program. They really work together, share resources. So I really hope that that this is going to really complement the Open Doors Outreach Network, program that we're now taking on. And then I just wanted to hit on, when we're talking about really, whole child, I know many of you think about our work with developmental screenings and the pop-up preschool and our early childhood education work that we do in the community. But, we feel like all of these things, the work due to support families, just really enhances the protective factors around children and families, and that we can carry this work forward, by all of this kind of early intervention and prevention. We are going to help mitigate some of the sexual and human trafficking issues that we have, we hope. So we're always thinking about strengthening families, and we know, and we'll talk more about this later, that when families start to get in a position where they're concerned about meeting their needs, especially around housing and shelter and food, this is when they can be vulnerable. So if we can support them in so many ways, it's all the better. So thank you again for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to answering questions and getting deeper into the discussion.
Thank you, Courtney. And, you couldn't be more right on with what you're saying. And also the idea of fortifying the community and fortifying families so they don't have these economic devastations, whether it's, recently with COVID and what's happened with so many people losing jobs, and with the eviction moratorium being lifted and all the vulnerability out there. We know how nimble traffickers can be to take advantage of folks at that time. So yes, all of that is so important. And thank you so much to your team. And Charlie, good to see you. Looking forward to meeting with you next week. Okay, so Catherine, I was wondering if and yeah, great. And we can look at the poll. So before some of you came on, you got on a little early, so you got a plus for coming on early, but you all did a poll. And we'd like, if you could show that, Catherine, and what I'd like to invite all of our panelists to do, and you too, for us to go through what you think, and maybe just even get into a little bit more depth on this idea of myths and realities in the Big Bend. So let's have a discussion really amongst all of us. And if you feel like turning on your cameras so we can see each other and have this be a conversation, feel free to do that if you can do that safely and you have the bandwidth, because it's really fun to see your faces if we can. So I'll just use my prerogative as a moderator here to ask you to do that if you want to. So here's the myths and facts. So the first one, so everybody, Courtney, Cecka, Taylor, let's go through and look at this and take a gander at the question, and then say, all right, so what do we want to comment on this? So the first one is that trafficking victims can come from a range of income levels and may come from families with higher socioeconomic status. The answer is that is true. I think all of those of you got that. And in all fairness, I want to tell you this. So you all learned some stuff when we just did our opening. So you didn't know it before, but now you know it. So I think this probably would have been a 100%, right, Cecka? Because you answered this question in your presentation.
Yes, absolutely. I think that the myth is that it's the rundown neighborhood, the rundown zip code, the people who are in poverty, and that is just not the case. And I think Courtney can tell you that with ODON, you look at that age range, 10 to 24, 23. That's a large age range, but the age that comes up the most is somewhere between 13 and like 16 and 17. And I'm telling you, in every school in this county, there have been human trafficking incidents. And it can happen. And so let me say this, I am not a huge fan of, and this group knows this, of the glamourization of crime. That being said, I do watch SVU, the old one, Law and Order SVU. And one of the episodes that really stuck with me was a young girl who lied to her parents and said she was going to spend the night with someone. And she took a bus trip to New York City and got there, and two gentlemen played her against each other. One played like he was robbing her. The other one came and saved her and starts providing for her. And the next thing she knows, she's being trafficked and thinks she's in love with this gentleman, with this guy. That kind of thing happens. She was from an affluent family in a suburb outside of New York. So please know that irrespective of any of that, HT can happen in any neighborhood, any zip code.
Exactly. Would you like to come in, Courtney or Taylor, any other comments you'd like to make on that question?
Yeah, sure. I think the key part there was may happen or can happen. And it can happen to anybody in any community, but it disproportionately happens to people who are without resources or without community support. And so I think we need to make sure we're putting equity towards the folks who are more likely to be involved in this and to be vulnerable to traffickers. So I would say that if you don't have resources, LGBTQ, a lot of Black communities too, just from seeing our high-risk victims here in town and the names that are constantly on them, it's people who have very little to turn, and their families have very little supports as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments, or ready to go to number 2? Second question was, human trafficking is found only in illegal underground industries and that the general public doesn't come in contact with it. 100% correct. That is false. You've already heard about, and we've seen, I could tell you half of STAC's caseload right now does include labor trafficking survivors. And that could be in construction, in landscaping, in agriculture, in hotels. And one of the interesting stories I probably should share with you is that very many times traffickers actually use legit legal businesses as front companies for their activities. So you might see a restaurant like a cantina or a any other sort of legitimate looking business. In fact, we've trained some of the local Capital City Bank employees. It was great just to say, hey, some of your customers, some of your clients might actually be front companies for trafficking. And indeed, they have recently found some who've been using the bank to launder money. So absolutely correct on that one. And I don't know that we need to talk about that anymore, but anybody want to weigh in on that one? It just goes to show the ubiquity of this. It is really everywhere. Okay, U.S. citizens cannot be victims of labor trafficking. Anybody, looks like, again, 100% correct on that one. You all might know about the case out of Palatka, which is where the Evans family farm was going to our state's homeless shelters and actually offering jobs, a place to live, 3 hots and a cot, as they say, food, and really targeted people who had substance use disorder. So they were wanting to find that vulnerability among the homeless population, including a large cohort of African-American men, included veterans anyway, kind of entice them to this job in Palatka. And then when they got up here, they were forced to pick cabbages and tomatoes and potatoes and other vegetables on this farm. If you see the pictures from the prosecution, they all went to federal prison, by the way, who did this. The barbed wire facing in on this essential labor camp that would kind of curl your toes to see the horrific conditions that those farmers made their workers live in. So yeah, U.S. citizens are vulnerable there too. Any comments or questions from the panel or Anyone on the call from either one of those questions? Anything you want to weigh in on? Because you all, I mean, we're all teachers and learners in this group. I mean, that's for sure. So anybody want to weigh in on those?
I would just add that that speaks to the prevention of human trafficking too. You know, instead of getting on to how we constantly respond and these individualistic like sting operations and kind of playing whack-a-mole of what we're doing, imagining a community where everyone can access a real job that pays them good money and accepts them as they are when they come through the doors. So, you know, thinking about the prevention of why someone may need to look at a billboard on the side of the road and take that job.
There you go. Great comment.
Well, Robin,
yes.
if I may, one of the reasons we are doing this with UPHS is that it is important for everyone to just keep a keen eye open and look at situations and see if something doesn't seem right. If you run a local business or a local nonprofit and you notice maybe a person comes in and there's something that just isn't right, preventing this and intervening in this is not just the job of ODON or STAC or Taylor and capital T or CHS. It's really all of us. And so when Taylor talks about jobs with a living wage, when she talks about being able to apply for a job and not worry about your quote status, whatever that, and I put that in quotes because it's just the most crazy term in the world, I think, for anyone to use. We're all humans. And so when we can imagine and actively build a world and a society like that, we are each other's keepers, and we can't walk around and act like these things don't exist. So it is vitally important that as human service agencies and organizations that we incorporate these kinds of trainings that STAC does so that your teams can recognize it, not only with the people who are coming to get your services, but also within your organizations. So it goes all the way around.
Absolutely. And to your point too, I want to highlight a comment that Justin made. And Justin, you're talking about housing first practices equals human trafficking prevention. I know you're not a shy guy. Are you able to talk and tell us what you mean by housing first practices? Or can you come on now and unmute Justin? No, I guess he can't. But notice that oh, there you are. No, you're not. Okay, so you can't. All right, that's fine. But Justin, thank you for your comment. And I think that that's absolutely true. All of us who are doing any kind of services and support so that people are not vulnerable in any ways people can be vulnerable, we really call that anti-trafficking work too. It just, because it is. Our next question is one that we do have a little difference of opinion. Justin is having connectivity issues. That's cool, Justin. Thanks for weighing in on the chat. So sex trafficking and prostitution are the same thing. We've got a difference of opinion, a slight difference of opinion, with 92% saying false and 8% saying true. It is false. Human trafficking and prostitution are not the same thing. There can be overlaps. As I explained in the beginning, when you look at human trafficking and say as an adult who is trafficked, there has to be that element of force or fraud or coercion. So, so know that they are not the same thing. Now we do have, obviously there are lots and lots of thought leaders who have gone deeply into this issue, and there is some disagreement in the field about this, but from a pure legal standpoint, and for what you'd have in terms of the community's response, they are not the same thing. And then you'll hear from people who are not being trafficked, who are part of the commercial sex industry, who will also say, no, I'm not being trafficked. This is my choice. So know that they are not the same thing in terms of many different points of view and also under the law. Let me open this up. That's just a background. And we could talk for probably 2 hours on this, I promise you, even if we were two, like all in the strong traditional feminist community. And we'd still not come to the, all of agreement probably on this. But anybody want to say anything on this or weigh in?
I want to weigh in, and I just like to ask a question of people more expert than I am in this. It feels to me like has there been research or is there discussion around how potentially sexual exploitation it can lead into prostitution? Children who have been sexually exploited or trafficked, is there any research to show or discussions around that leading into prostitution?
Taylor, it looked like you were getting ready to speak.
Sure. Yeah. I would say that sex work makes you more vulnerable to being trafficked, just like being a migrant farm worker makes you more vulnerable to being labor trafficked, right? And the issue isn't sex work or how someone decides to survive. If you think about, if you see someone and you're on a boat and they're floating and they've got a little raft and that's all they have is this awful raft. And then you say, look at this person on a raft, ugh, what are they doing? They're doing it wrong. It's like, no, that's what they use to survive because there's no room on your boat and you won't let them on. And so until we make it so that people can show up and get jobs where they're thriving or when their communities can take care of them, we can't criticize what they do so that they can put food on the table and survive. And, sex work is a labor rights issue. Sex work should be decriminalized, not legalized, but decriminalized. And people should have those options. And, the difference is consent. So some people enjoy sex work. They do it because they like it. And that shouldn't be something that we harp on someone for. And I know there's a lot of conversation around this, and like Robin was saying, there's a lot of debate around it. But I highly encourage you to look at sex worker collectives, Red Umbrella or Third Wave Fund, and Point Source Youth, which has a wonderful training on youth who are doing sex work. And them very much so talking about the social services that they left because they told them they were a victim of human trafficking when they were openly saying, I'm doing sex work. And so, you can decide if you're here to serve the policies and the system and the laws that still haven't made room for us to show up, or if you're here for the clients who are in front of you trying to tell you about their experiences. And a lot of times it can't be both with the system we're currently in.
One of the things that we've found, Taylor, with the people that we've served as adults, and going back to your observation, Courtney, is that we found that children who were trafficked as children and they were parental trafficked or there was a relative, as they've turned it, past the age of 18, we find that they have been so traumatized by that experience that they have a difficult time negotiating in the world, like you're saying, just getting to the next, keeping maybe a job or getting food, or if they have substance use issues, or as you're saying, finding a place in our community to get some services and some assistance. It's hugely difficult, even if they may not be, again, meeting the legal definition of being trafficked, because they may have no trafficker, they may have no one forcing them to do it, but it's the only way they have been able to survive. And it is very difficult. And so I think that, again, people have sometimes very simplistic, like binary ideas of this, but it really is multi-layered and multi-textural and really challenging. It looks like, Charlie, you've raised your hand. Would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback off of something that Taylor stated, is that we have a tendency to cope with trauma by normalizing. And so what that means is that if you were growing up in a family situation where you are your body is being used as a sexual commodity, you can choose to look at yourself as a victim, or you can decide to normalize that behavior. And so oftentimes people will cope by normalizing. And so in their view, engaging in human sex trafficking, I'm not a victim. I'm a willing, active participant. And so just in doing a lot of research, I'm finding that one of the obstacles that individuals like myself face is helping individuals to distinguish whether or not they were active, willing participants, or if they were victimized. And so Taylor raised some good points in that not everyone views themselves as a victim. And so when you're taking that trauma-informed care approach, is that you are collaborating with the individual that is in front of you. You're not taking a blanketed approach. And something Cecka stated, she used the word intersect, and I'm a big studier of intersectionality. And it's just important to recognize that the experience that someone like myself, an African-American female from New York, what my experiences are, they're not going to be the same as an African-American female growing up in Alabama. And understanding we cannot take a blanketed approach, and we have to support the individual and not the group or the category that they're from, and learning them and getting to know them and collaborating with them and making sure that they are actively engaged and a participant in their wellness plans. And I think that's when you really, can help them on that transition, on that path to well-being. So I just wanted to state that.
Thank you, Charlie. And everything you said applies to someone, no matter what form of trafficking they have endured. Everyone looking at them as individuals' unique needs, and then doing that, survivor-centered, trauma-informed approach that really is tailored to exactly their situation. And I have any other comments on that one? We've got a few more questions, so we can move through. Catherine, oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Cecka.
I do want to weigh in because from a dependency standpoint, we're looking at children younger than 18, and a child who is put in a situation, a human trafficking situation at 9, 10, sometimes younger than that, they may grow into thinking that this is a choice, this is what I choose. And so I think Charlie and Taylor both are right on target. And this is why the ODOM model has that counselor there and the ability to meet someone where they are. And the biggest piece of that we all have to learn is not to judge, because you don't know what really happened. You will never know what really happens in any victim's experience. You'll only know what they divulge to you. And I don't think you ever know everything. And so it is a place of non-judgment. It is a place of second, third, fourth, fifth chances. Every time there is the desire to do something different, we have to be there to say, we are going to work with you until you get where it is you want to be. Greatness is defined by the person, not by society. And that is something we have to understand. We cannot put our view of what success is, what healing is, what all of that is on people holistically, but rather ask them and work with them to achieve where they want to be in this world. Because the reality is, some people are only going to get so far because that trauma was so deep and so harsh that it's only going to let them get to a certain place for them to be able to maintain. And so we can't look at any of it as a failure, but rather I'm just trying to work with that person to get to where they want to be. And so I do want to say that, because that's been a big thing in my life here recently.
Absolutely. Thank you both for all of those observations, 1000%, and you're getting acknowledgements there. Sheila Combs, would you like to say something? I see your hand up. if you want to unmute Sheila, or you're trying. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, okay, there you go.
Actually, I pressed the wrong symbol.
Oh,
But since I'm
okay.
here, I want to applaud the last three who made statements because they were spot on.
Okay. All right. Absolutely.
Really awesome.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. So this is Maisha Mitchell. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Maisha.
How y'all doing? I concur with Sheila. Everybody's been really on target. I just wanted to add one other idea here because of the powerfulness of this presentation today. Thank you all very much. But what I'm finding is in the research world that what you're talking about is open, it's really open territory now in terms of NIH and the folk who are trying to seek more information and knowledge about where do you go from here with these types of issues, particularly as it relates to healthcare. In my world, you know, the healthcare world, we always trying to figure out how these intersectional kinds of things bring about change and where families need to connect up. And when you look at trauma and stress, this is critical at this time, you know, and we see how important it is in our children's lives and the families that we're talking about here. And so I'd encourage you all to think about looking at peer research options that are going on, where you engage in the women or the men who are involved and telling their stories. And NIH is wide open to this, and there's funding opportunities for you all in that shared research protocols that's happening in our area, particularly as it relates to the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, and issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's great. Thank you for that. And also thank you for mentioning healthcare, because what we've seen certainly is that the healthcare world, there are some great advocates around anti-human trafficking efforts. There's a group called HEAL, HEAL, trafficking.org. And the points you raised, Maisha, are so important. And thanks for letting us know that. Great. All right, we're going to kind of continue to go through. I think this is going well, don't you? Just going through some of these myths and seeing where we're at. Catherine, do you want to say anything? We haven't heard from you since the beginning. Anything you want to weigh in on?
Well, I'm really happy to hear the conversation being so inclusive of different areas of human services. And, you know, with UPHS, we obviously work with agencies who serve our community in a number of different ways. And it's just so important that all of our agencies understand how pervasive this is in the community. We want you all to know, of course, who to make the referrals to when you do come across, you know, warning signs in the work that you're doing. But we also want you to be empowered to do your own anti-trafficking work just through the organization that you are leading or working with. So I'm just thrilled with the way this conversation is shaping up and for your leadership for our panel and how you've guided the discussion.
Great, thanks. And really, I see you say it again, it takes a village, all of us. Yes, I see that, Cecka, in the chat. Okay, so another question we had, I think we've also gone over the fact that a minor does not have to be forced. And Cecka, we've covered that, and that might have been a learning point for whoever answered, the folks who answered that question. We had quite a few on this issue of whether human trafficking is a type of smuggling that must involve some sort of travel, transportation, or movement. I covered that in the beginning, and I think everyone would be clear now that you do not need any kind of movement for that to be trafficking. And very often it is confused, and I think the media is getting better, but sometimes you'll hear people refer to a smuggling ring when it's a trafficking ring, and vice versa. And note too, to make it even more kind of dicey sometimes, you know, you sometimes have both smuggling and trafficking occurring at the same time with groups. So I think everyone knows the difference now on that one. So how about this question of there must be elements of physical restraint, force, bondage when identifying a human trafficking situation? The majority of people said that was false, which is the correct answer. Anybody want to weigh in on this? I mean, from our perspective at STAC, we have never seen that. And we're often trying to counter the myth that traffickers, cruise around parking lots and in white vans and snatch children into their van and drive off. And in fact, what we try to share with folks is that your child is probably, I know, more vulnerable online. We know that traffickers, the numbers that are coming out of the National Human Trafficking Hotline are showing that online sex trafficking has exploded during the pandemic. There has been more and more of that. And also that traffickers are looking for kids and children and youth, as well as adults, but mostly youth, befriending them online. And I'm not talking just about social media apps. I'm talking about any gaming that happens. Anytime, any of the Fortnite. I'm not with it to know what kids are playing online now, but traffickers will get in there, start playing these games with your children or your grandchildren, and all of a sudden be giving them little bonuses, start to talk to them, asking them to send pictures, asking them to send nudes, asking them, and then essentially doing something we call sextortion, which is once they've sent any picture that's in any way, showing any kind of part of your human body, or that is something that's used against that child who sent them. That's the trafficker saying, oh, now that you've sent me that, I want more. And if you don't, I'm going to share this with your church group because you've told me all about your church group. I'm going to share it with your class, your family. I know where you go to school now. So you find that sort of, befriending and grooming turning into abuse and exploitation. So none of that necessarily at all involves any kind of physical restraint. Not that that can't happen. We know that it happens, but it's very much the other way around with coercion and fraud. Anybody want to comment on that or weigh in?
Yeah, just one quick point. This is my issue again. So unusual suspects. I was working with a group of young people who needed to get their GEDs. And I discovered a couple of young ladies who would regular come into the classes, and I would say, well, where were you? You've been absent a week or so. And out with their boyfriends. And so when I delved deeper, come to find out they were involved. And so GED programs, where the people are in and out, oftentimes not usual suspects, but we need to look at that environment because of what I just described. And it's not all that unusual with these young women. I want to make that note.
Thank you. Yes, young women, young men. One of the myths we see is a lot of people think that only, girls or females are sex trafficked. It could also be your young men trying to get a GED. Exactly. Right. And so thanks for that comment. Right on. Yeah. Anything else? And Charlie, is your hand still up from before? Or would you like to make another comment?
No, I raised it again.
Okay.
You asked the poll posed a very important question. As I go out into the community to increase awareness about open doors, that is one of the myths that I am trying to work to dispel to increase referral submission, because Hollywood, it shines this light on a very specific type of human sex trafficking. And so one of the hurdles that I now have to overcome is trying to open people's eyes and help them to recognize that's one type. And there are various types of human sex trafficking. So I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's important for people in the community to know. So when I'm contacting people and I'm sending out emails, making those phone calls, I don't just say human sex trafficking or commercial sexual exploitation of children. I say this involves family trafficking. This involves boyfriends. This involves partners. This involves classmates. It's just so important that we work to dispel these myths, because there are a lot of people who are eligible for our services, but because people have this thing in their mind as to what defines human sex trafficking, they may not think that someone who is eligible. You get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's a very important question that you asked, and in all of my presentations, that is one of the things that I hit on, is that let's not pigeonhole human sex trafficking. Open your eyes and understand that the victims in this crime live right here among us, and they are in your own backyard.
And I think too, Charlie, wouldn't you agree that when you think about this idea of physical restraint, again, our minds usually go to that kidnapping, that take-in, that scenario.
Exactly.
When in fact, not only is that not how someone's brought into a trafficking situation, it's also not why they stay. Again, going back to the Palatka labor trafficking case, they did stay because there were a great number of physical restraints. They also stayed though because the traffickers, the labor traffickers were, giving them alcohol and drugs as part of their quote payment. And so they were using the power manipulation of substance use and addiction to keep them there. And then, other kinds of coercive tools. We'll see nannies and housekeepers taking perhaps children to the bus stop with cell phones in their pocket. But are they ever going to call 911? No, because they are coerced, psychologically coerced to stay in the situation, and they don't need physical restraints, right?
And something, I'm looking at one of the comments and it looks like Gwen, and she stated mental manipulation of youth. And I worked with a lot of survivors of DV, of domestic violence. And people, when they think of domestic violence, guess what that myth is that it involves physical abuse. What I commonly saw though, was that emotional abuse. Was that gaslighting? And so if you understand that is just as powerful, if not even more powerful than being physically restrained. When in your mind, you are locked, where you're in quicksand in your mind. So even if someone opened the door, opened all the windows, you're not jumping out, you're not running out, because you are there, that prison, it's occurring in your mind. And so it's just so important, like I said, to work to dispel these myths, because that's really how we're going to be able to impact this population. So that's it. Let me stop. I'll leave it to someone.
You know what, Charlie? I'm so glad you have this job now. I can't wait to train with you.
Me too, I can't wait to have coffee or lunch with you. I know
we're already planning. So here's the thing, everyone. I mean, this is actually an idea that we can just put out there now. I know you're going to be doing this. We do it too, which is some of you might want to go deeper on some of these issues. You might want to have a training for your agency. We do this a lot. As I mentioned, we've trained everyone from, Capital City Bank to most recently Disc Village. So there are nuances about how human trafficking and this sort of, understanding that it's on a continuum, how it might appear with your main population that you support and assist in the community. You might want something that's specific to what the work is that you do. So know that we're going to be there for you. So just let us know, right? We'll come out and do that kind of work with you for sure. Okay, I think we've covered the idea of that all sex trafficking victims are female. They are not. In fact, male vulnerability makes a lot of young men very, very vulnerable to traffickers, particularly if they are gay or have any other kind of vulnerability that they are, not able to survive. And so, yeah, there's absolutely it's an unfortunately, equal opportunity victimization. Looks like the last question here, and I'm going to go to that and then kind of open it up more. COVID-19 has had little to no effect on human trafficker tactics and victim vulnerability. So again, I'm just going to guess that this was obviously done before we had the presentation. And just to know that COVID-19 has had a huge impact. I mean, it's correlated and for some populations, and this is the most recent research out of the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which I'll try to put up in the chat before we end. It has shown that migrant farm workers have become more vulnerable than ever. And these are people who are trafficked after coming into the US on a valid visa. So this H-2A program, which brings in agricultural workers, they were labeled and called essential workers brought into this country, and the reports to the hotline on that population, again, exploded as those individuals were exploited and trafficked, even though they were here legally under a proper visa. And then the second is, I mentioned how during COVID, online exploitation has increased. And we've also seen instances in our work at STAC with other victimizations. You mentioned, Charlie, the idea of intersectionality. Some of the first folks that we saw were women who were domestic violence and currently being victimized in a domestic violence situation, whose traffickers started to force them to have sex for money. So they were both domestic violence abusers or batterers as well as traffickers, because that was a new victimization they perpetrated. And that correlated exactly with the onset of the pandemic. Anyone else want to weigh in thoughtfulness on that? Because I know that a lot of you are in human services. Has the pandemic and how has the pandemic affected your services and your ability to assist people?
Well, I'll jump right in here. COVID-19 absolutely has impacted services. So CHS developed a warm line, toll-free number for texting as well as calling, to connect people, irrespective of whether you're involved in dependency or not, to try to help alleviate some of the pressures and the stresses that we know were going on due to job loss. If there already was some sort of domestic violence, substance abuse, mental health issues, anything like that going on, all COVID-19 did was exacerbate it and make it even worse. We saw an influx of kids, and listen, we probably still haven't seen what the effects of COVID-19 is going to do when it comes to children possibly coming into the system. So I think COVID-19 impacted every aspect of our world and impacted human trafficking probably in a way that the numbers aren't even gonna come out yet. It won't be until we're on the other side, which who knows when that's going to be at this point, that we really know what that impact is. But if you were already in a trafficked situation, all it did was make things worse, not to mention job loss. And I mean, maybe I shouldn't say this, but it became a trafficker's emporium, because you've got people who lost their jobs and look, jobs that were already probably not paying the best, but lost their jobs. And now they're trying to figure out how to manage their lives, their families' lives, their kids' lives, in many cases, extended family that have now had to co-locate. So yeah, it has had an impact all the way around. And I don't think there's any human service organization that hasn't seen it.
Absolutely. And I see that we've hit 11:30 actually. Taylor, would you like to give us the final comment and we will wind down here and say our thanks?
Sure. Yeah, I agree with Cecka, and I wanted to add that it's made it harder on survivors too, with an LGBTQ kids of being in those households, not being able to access your community and not being able to access your teacher who listened to you, or that friend who you could contact with. And so it's gotten really lonely. And I think that has made people run away a lot quicker to get away from the abuse of the household, as well as suicide rates going up. So people just not having access to their communities that have kind of kept them afloat through a lot of this.
Well, thank you all. Thank you again. And again, Cecka, Courtney, Taylor, all of you have participated in the audience. I just want to thank you again. Know that Imagine Freedom is going on for the next 2 days now. Other activities you can participate in. Please check out our website and surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. And contribute your time, your thoughtfulness, your resources, whatever is comfortable for you. And I thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to Catherine.
Thank you all so much. We just have so much gratitude for our panel and for all of you for joining us today and the work you do to make Tallahassee better. Wish you all a great Thursday, and we'll see you again soon.